What's a stupid thing you've done that you still think WTF did I do that for? This thread has brightened up my day. Years ago spotted my crush in the club. We were on flirty terms, so in my haste to make a beeline to him, I completely misjudged the steps down to where he was standing and landed sprawled at his feet. I don't remember him at all really, but I still cringe at his "I'll give you 1 out of 10 for that" entrance. We had a beautiful old chair, which DH had recently glued as it had become wobbly. The glue had run down the frame of the backrest, so I picked it all off. Later I went to use the chair to place a bowl on top of a cupboard. DH said, "Don't stand on that, it's not safe." I did. Chair snapped in half. I went straight down onto a stone floor. A and E said it was the worst broken ankle they had ever seen. Still hurts 3 years later, and I limp now. Renovating our house, DH left me demolishing a hideous brick chimney surround. For some reason I started from the bottom, and obviously a pile of bricks fell on my hand from height. I sat and sobbed in the rubble. Was very badly bruised, but so lucky not to break anything. When we were kids we found a huge plastic barrel in a field. It was enormous and us 4 9 to 10-year-old kids all fitted into it easily. So we did what any self-respecting kid of that age would do and dragged it to the top of a huge hook, climbed inside and rolled down. It went a hell of a lot faster than we expected and only stopped when it smacked into wall. My sister broke her nose, and we thought my friend was dead as she was knocked unconscious. Oh, and did I mention the vomiting on the way down, and spinning round covered in it like we were in a giant washing machine. I decided to be arty-farty and paint the floorboards in our bedroom. Like a knob, I started at the door and painted myself into the corner. DH nearly broke a rib laughing, and my kids were too amused and kept offering to chuck me food like a sea lion in a zoo getting fish. A camembert I baked slid off the tray when I was taking it out the oven. I caught it with my hand. It was like molten lava, and I ended up getting treatment at the burns unit. In a hurry making quick lunch of buttered crumpet with honey, yum, but dregs of honey in plastic squeezy bottle was solid. As I was in a rush made daft decision to pop it in microwave to melt it, returned to table, and as I tipped it towards my crumpet a jet of molten lava honey sprayed out onto my hand. I have never moved so fast to the sink to run cold water on it. It was so hot that some which hit a piece of paper nearby blackened it. My hand was badly burned, but honestly, I was happy it had hit me and not my daughter in the high chair beside me. I decided to test whether a knife was too sharp for a child to use cutting dough by dragging the blade across my palm. It was too sharp. On a school trip, someone persuaded me to get into the shower with him before he got out, because it will go cold otherwise, and I then had the awkward situation that he didn't get out as I had somehow imagined he would, as I got in. He was physically repulsive, and I just didn't see this coming at all. We both stood there for a while until he finally got out. I didn't dare look down. We were the 2 teachers in charge of the trip. Oh God. So many. Mostly horse-related. Turning my horse out in the field, she saw something in the distance and whipped her head round, but didn't bother about fact mine was in the way. No idea how I got home. Rang work to tell them I wouldn't be in, was definitely concussed. They were quite worried as I was apparently talking about a cat landing on my head, so they sent a first aid around to check on me. Luckily by the time she arrived I was fine, just a very large lump on my head for a while. My mum wondered what would happen if she put her whole hand in my young horse's mouth. She was very upset when he bit his grandma. Not the pain, but the fact he'd bitten his grandma. I did wonder what she thought was going to happen. Riding my horse knowing the saddle wasn't right, and if I wasn't careful it would slip. Horse was somewhat fresh and went full on rodeo. I didn't last long after saddle went underneath his stomach. Trying to fasten my horse's girth, Hand slipped and I punched myself very hard in the face. Thoroughly sleep deprived following birth of DD number 1. Made myself some pasta for dinner as DH was at work. Took the pan of pasta off the hob, and rather than strain it over the sink, I strained it stood by the cooker, pouring boiling hot water all over my feet. Idiot. Balanced a boiling hot cup of tea on my knee whilst wearing a nightshirt. I was on the phone to my best friend at the time. I jerked at the hot tea, went all over my crotch and upper thighs. It made me scream, it was so painful. I'm sure the poor girl thought I was being murdered. So embarrassing. Hope you are enjoying today's video from Mother's Narrative Network. Please like, comment and subscribe for more daily uploads. Don't forget to click the notification bell. Well, there was the time I was slicing the remains of a boneless rolled turkey that we'd cooked for Christmas. There was quite a bit, so I decided to slice it all so could be frozen. Very efficient, don't I know. So sliced a bit and then had to cut a bit of the string that held it together. Was having problems, so turned the knife to slice under the string, which meant the knife was pointing at my left hand, which was holding the whole thing. Of course the knife slipped and I inserted a good portion of an 8-inch butcher's knife into my hand. Cue screams for help. DH, the sympathetic ass, patched me up while suggesting that I shouldn't have tried to cut the string that way, and I certainly should have been using a fork to hold the roast instead of my hand. I once tried to get out of the car without taking my seatbelt off, in front of teenage Bil and his friends. I took 2 blunt knives to be sharpened. On the way there I wrapped them in newspaper, and all was well. On the way back, I also wrapped them in newspaper, and put them in my gold leather tote bag, which fitted snugly over my shoulder and under my arm. When I got home, I took off my down-filled jacket, and a cloud of feathers floated into the air. My newly sharp and pointy knives had made multiple tiny slices through my beautiful bag and through my jacket. They were both ruined and had to be thrown away. I was very lucky they hadn't also pierced multiple holes in my rib cage and armpits. 2 days later, I dropped one of my lovely sharp knives and the point snapped off in 2 places. This is one my DH did. Driving down the motorway in France and the roof box pings open, sending pillows, sleeping bags etc. into the carriageway. He parks on the hard shoulder and runs across the luckily quiet motorway to collect everything. He gets everything back miraculously, and I think he puts it all in the boot. We have some string, so he begins trying to tie it shut with that. Police turn up, he explains, and they tell him to drive to next service station and buy straps to keep it closed properly. Police leave, we pull out, and within 5 minutes the roof box has popped open again, and the contents are again bouncing along the motorway. Motorway has suddenly got busier, so not possible to retrieve contents. Drive to service station, minus all the bedding for our holiday. I was livid with him at the time for being daft enough to put everything back in the box after it opened the first time. DH is an optimist and never thinks bad things will happen, certainly not twice, so things like this happen to him all the time. Aside from marrying my ex-H, I have done many stupid things, some more life-endangering than others. Walked away from a cash point once, forgetting to take the £500 I'd withdrawn to pay the rental deposit on a flat. Waited a few nail-biting days to find out that the machine had sucked the money back in before anyone else could take it, thankfully. I set my kitchen entirely on fire when I was about 10. I'd put a plastic Tupperware lid with chocolate on to melt. Why? Promptly forgot about it. Came back to the oven, hob and kitchen cupboards blazing. I told Mum I was making toast for my sister, so she didn't bury me under the patio. The firefighters thought it was hilarious, thankfully. When I was 15, I got a train from Norwich to Bristol to meet a boy I'd talked to on MySpace, confused, thank God he wasn't a 60-year-old man that ended up murdering me. We're still friends 18 years later. And then there was the time I had spotted a monster spider playing hide and seek around the smoke detector above our bed. Now in some ways I couldn't care less. I'm actually rather fond of spiders, even the huge ones. Then again, I don't really want it crawling over me during the night. And I certainly don't want my DH spotting it, as he would scream the house down. So loving wife that I decide to hop up on the bed to capture but kill the creature. This seems fairly easy, but I had a knee replacement a few weeks earlier and was still a bit unstable when standing, so stepping up onto the bed was more difficult than I had anticipated. But I got up there with tissues ready in my hand and reached up to crunch the spider. That's when I realized that it was a bit too far for me to stretch, so I bounced a bit on the bed. The tissues made contact with the spider and I came down a bit hard on my bad leg, which collapsed under me. I fell over backwards diagonally across the bed and crashed with my shoulder against the corner of the bedside table. As I lay there trying to get my breath back, I flashed back to all those TV shows about accidental deaths and realized how close I had been from truly serious injury, or worse, if I'd hit my head instead of my shoulder. It was only after a couple more minutes that I remembered what I had been trying to do and fortunately discovered I still had the tissues clenched tightly in my hand and they contained well-mashed spider. OMG, quite a few, but a recent one, which I'm embarrassed to tell people about, is driving through 3 speed cameras in 2 weeks and getting 6 points. One of them I could do a course for. The worst thing is one of them is by my house, and I know it's 30 miles per hour. But for some reason speeded through it twice. Duh. Go out with my ex for so long. He was a complete tosser, and I didn't see that until a long while after. I started going out with him when I was quite young. He worked in the city, always had money, and I admit I was quite dazzled. My dad always warned against him, but who heeds their parents at that age? You always know better, don't you? I went out with him on and off for years before I finally got myself together and ditched him. I ended up in the witness box at the Old Bailey giving evidence against him when he used my name and home address in a scam with 5 other blokes. Thank God he got sent down, because if my dad had got his hands on him, I think he would have killed him, which is saying something, as my dad was gentle and kind and always thought the best of everyone. Ran out of dishwasher liquid in the busy kitchen I worked at, so tried using washing up liquid instead. Went on a girls' trip to New York City when I was 21 at Christmas. We got to hotel about 7 p.m. and ordered room service. The girls fell asleep early and I was bored, so went for a walk on my own. Ended up in a very dodgy part on my own. Think blatant drug addicts and prostitutes hanging around on corners, run-down shops, etc. Stood on the edge of the pavement and a man turned up in a car, said he was a taxi. I was so desperate to get back to hotel I got in. Luckily for me, he didn't rape or murder me. I did have to wait in his locked car outside a phone repair shop for 40 minutes whilst he got his mobile fixed. Got back to the hotel, then realized how stupid I'd been and was awake all night with adrenaline rush. Girls nearly killed me when they woke up and I told them. In Jamaica, I tried to catch a glass bottle that had fell out the mini bar, but it smashed and a piece came flying up and sliced through my finger. Still have no feeling in it as went through my nerve. Had to have stitches with no anesthetic. Tried to catch a pan of boiling water with spaghetti in it. Spaghetti stuck to hands and still have scars now. When I was 15, I got drunk on absinthe and walked 2 hours home down country lanes, no street lights, open fields. Don't remember actually walking home, just the odd flashback. But I do remember I was ill for 3 days after. Going upstairs, I decided not to do so empty-handed. I can't recall what I was going to take. So I changed direction, thinking I was only a step above the wide bottom step, not further up the narrow ones, putting my foot confidently ahead. As I'd taken my hand off the banisters to turn, I went forward and put my foot into thin air. Down I tumbled, putting a hand out to break my fall. What the hell? I broke 2 bones each in my hand and arm. broke my nose and knocked my front teeth out. 7 hours in A&E, who were still mopping up the Saturday night drunks. In plaster overnight, with strapping on fingers and stitches in nose and mouth, dental splint to try and save teeth. The breaks were simple and healed, but dental work is another matter, have a temporary denture. I'm halfway through getting implants with metalwork in my gums. It takes time to heal between each process, and then COVID came along. This April it'll be 3 years since the fall. But I could have broken my neck. Hey ho, I'm alive. I approach stairs with great caution now. I was taking out a bin bag of rubbish at 3 a.m. I had been working a combination of nights and days, and my sleep pattern was thoroughly disrupted. It was raining, there were 5 steps down to the bin. I was wearing flip-flops. I slipped on step 1 and fell forward, still clutching the bin bag, and bumped onto step 2, 3, 4 and 5 and landed in a heap at the bottom. Somehow I managed to crawl back into the house and yelled for help. DH was on a night shift, but I had 4 sleeping children. Eventually my youngest Didi heard and came to find me. She was 9. She called 999 and then her dad. I had broken my pelvis in several places and torn my femoral artery. She came with me to A&E and stayed with me until DH arrived. I was in hospital for 17 weeks after that little episode, and even now, I can't understand why putting the rubbish out was so important. Where shall I start? Slipped down 1 step. Grade 3 sprain on ankle. 2 screws broke finger with spooky horse. 2 screws dislocated shoulder waving a seagull away, dislocated other shoulder slipping on a bank when doing up fencing, broke another knuckle whilst shouting and gesturing at a cat. Hit it on kitchen door, and my best one ever. Helping a teacher light a thermite practical. Magnesium ribbon is the wick. She couldn't get the lighter to work, yes my ciggy lighter, so I took over. Yep, straight to A&E with a rather crispy thumb. Later, thanks to a somewhat traumatized teacher and some AGOG Year 11 students, that practical is now out of our curriculum. When I lived alone, one day my dog suddenly got sick. The vet said that I should bring him straight in. Trying to gather everything, leave the house and get him to have a wee. I locked myself in the back garden. I thought I'll squeeze back through the dog flap. Well, I got stuck in the way the garden was, no one could see. Eventually, I calmed down and managed to push myself back out. Had to run to the neighbor barefoot to call my dad to bring keys. Wouldn't have been too bad, but locked myself in my first week there, and I didn't have much on and had to go over there. When I was a kid, I wanted to show my friends what an electric fence was and way you shouldn't touch it by touching it. God knows what I was thinking with that one. DH proposed on a weekend away. Got smashed on champagne celebrating. Woke in the night desperate for a wee. Went to in suit and woke up properly when I found myself naked in the hotel corridor. Heard someone coming out of a nearby room, so I panicked and ran. This happened repeatedly until I had forgotten which room I had come out of. Was eventually rescued by hotel staff who had been watching me on CCTV running up and down the corridor naked. They gave me a spare bathrobe and let me back into the room where DH was fast asleep and unaware until I told him at breakfast the next day. He still married me. And I nicked the spare bathrobe. I still have it. This is outing, as I am surely the only fool who has done this. I was looking at a new car in a car showroom. Pressed the cigarette lighter in accidentally and pulled it out when I realized. Then touched the cigarette lighter to see if it was hot. It was. I had the circular pattern of the cigarette lighter seared into my fingertip and left a very noticeable burnt bacon-y smell in the car, which overwhelmed the new car smell. 6:30 a.m. in the morning, on my way to work, I pull over on double yellow lines to post a letter. For some reason I post my car keys into the post box, and get back in the car, clutching a brown envelope. The policeman who pulled over to ask why I was parked on double yellow lines cried with laughter when I told them what I had done. I bought the exterminator, a fancy tennis bat thing which gives insects, pesky wasps, a nasty electric shock. Tried it a few times and it seemed to do the job well, but still felt the need to test it out on myself. Similarly, I touched an electric fence to see if it was on. It was. Halfway through cleaning a glass cooker hob, when I decided to make some soup. I then proceed to pick the metal part up to put in the sink to soak after I had just finished using it. My hand was stuck like a claw for about 2 weeks and all angry and blistered. I also placed my hand on an electric hob to see if it had cooled down yet. In case you're wondering, it's still hot enough to burn your hand 10 minutes later. Made a brew in a cup of with a dodgy handle that obviously broke off as I was taking a sip. I've also poured a freshly made brew on myself to see if it would hurt. I swear I'm not that stupid. Years ago, I walked past Blockbusters, and for God knows what reason there was a hole in the window. A perfectly round finger-sized hole cut right into the center of the pane of glass. I stuck my finger in it and couldn't get it out for a good couple of minutes. Felt like a moron. Not me, but a student. She stuck her finger in a PVC tube to see if it would fit. Oh, it did, and then swelled up. So with some Vaseline and washing up liquid, I managed to get it off. But I did have images of having to take her to A&E. And also try very hard not to laugh. At home, alone, stone cold sober, and for no reason I can fathom, decided to try doing a Sporty Spice style high kick. I was wearing a pencil skirt. So as the right leg went up, it took the left with it and I fell on my ass so hard I winded myself. I had a similar incident in a pencil skirt. Only I was stepping up into a train. There was a curve in the platform, so a big gap between edge and train. I fell in and lost my shoe. And my dignity. Another time, as a child, we were visiting family who lived at the other end of the country. We went by train. I had hold of the dog. He fell down the gap. I didn't let go of the lead, so he was there hanging by the neck in a narrow space. Luckily, I managed to drag him up and out. I was a scrawny little kid. It was like one of those stories where someone lifts up a car with Herculean strength to save their child stuck underneath. I couldn't believe it. My mum nearly killed me after. I a very steep water slide years ago. Think it was called the Kamikaze or something like that. The highest, steepest drop slide you can imagine. I was instructed to keep my eyes shut, my head right back, and my arms crossed over my chest. On push-off, I decided to do none of those things. So cue the equivalent of industrial strength power hosing straight into my face, and spent the rest of the day with one missing contact lens, loss of nostril function, and completely deaf. The Greek godlike lifeguards thought I was hilarious though. Yes, the kamikaze require lying like you're in a coffin. I would also add best to cross your ankles, otherwise it's like someone aimed a fireman's hose up your hoo-ha. Last slide I went on, I was sitting, as you're supposed to, but must have been too tall, went head first into the roof, which jarred down onto my neck and got jammed in the tube. Ended up in A&E, unable to turn my neck and with shooting pains down my back and left arm. A&E have no sympathy, though they told me it's just whiplash, and that it would be a waste of time to see me. Apparently going head first into something at high speed isn't really the importance to the NHS, if you survived it and can still move your limbs. A year later, and I have shoulder pain and numbness in my arm that my doctor is convinced is related. I had a car crash not long after I passed my test. I was waiting at a junction to turn right, and for some reason I thought a car flashed me to go, and I just went, and this car went right into me. I had my 1-year-old in the car with me too. Thankfully we were okay. I never drove for 2 years after that, but I feel I've grown a lot since then and still do that same junction every so often and always think, why the fuck did I do that? Years ago, I dialed 9 on a work phone to begin calling an external number, but unconvinced it was working. I hit 9 several more times before the full stupidity of what I was doing hit me, and I quickly slammed the receiver down in horror before it could connect. I was a curious child and did loads of stupid stuff, some of which worked out fine and some of which didn't. I stuck my finger in the end of a handheld blender and turned it on, which resulted in a fair bit of blood. I told everyone my hand had slipped, but pretty sure I did it just to see what would happen. About a month later, I was using the food processor, and in those days, 80s, there wasn't the safety feature where you couldn't turn it on if the lid was off. I wondered if I would be able to hold the central turny bit still if I turned it on. Nope. Hand got sucked in and resulted in quite a lot more blood. My big sister came home and was really pissed off, as she'd only just persuaded my parents that we didn't need to go to the childminder after school. She was in secondary, so got home a bit later, leaving me to be home alone for a bit. Clearly I was not ready. So she made me run it under the tap and then squeeze it for hours with kitchen towel. Still got the scar 30 odd years later. I'm currently in bed. I've literally just pulled the covers up a bit, except they were stuck somewhere, so I've ended up punching myself in the mouth and bust my own lip. FFS. I was studying winking face laptop on my knees as I laid down studying. I moved up the bed. Laptop fell forward. Hit me on the cheekbone. Black eye. Studying is officially dangerous. I had an awful day once and bought myself a bottle of wine on the way home. I'm not really much of a drinker, especially not wine, so didn't think about needing a corkscrew. It was just one of those moments where you finally sit down after a terrible day, get to the wine, and wow, you can't open it. For some reason I decided to smash the bottle open with a hammer into the washing up bowl, then used a sieve to get rid of the glass. I don't know why I did this at all. My DH always tells me how lucky I was not to have ingested any fine bits of glass. My friend had been to Euro Disney and was showing me her autograph book with character signatures in. There was one I couldn't figure out what character it was and was racking my brain who it could be, and rather than just keep quiet I loudly blurted out, "Who the fuck is Gary Poppino?" That's what I read like to me. It was Mary Poppins. She hasn't let me forget it, and it's been 12 years. I bought a new steam generator iron, filled it with water, but it wasn't giving out any steam. When I pressed the button, held it up to my face to look at the plate on it, to see if it was blocked or anything, face full of steam, actually burned my face. What an idiot. Also, when I first lived on my own, a friend came for drinks. We decided it would be hilarious to squirt washing up liquid all over the floor and slide about in it. We then mopped it all up with towels and shoved them in the washer. Ended up with bubbles pouring out of it cause there was so much fairy in there. Mine started young. I jumped off the top of the stairs to see if I could fly. I had very convincing dreams, okay. I couldn't. I could, however, slam my forehead into the landing edge and do what must have been a spectacular mid-air roll. I distinctly remember deciding to jump, then being in a heap at the bottom of the stairs with my legs over my head and a large bump. Also mucking out a stable. In flip-flops. With a fork. Considering the ends are quite blunt, the tines go a surprising way into your foot. Twice. Or removing knots from a horse's manere, badly matted. Comb was useless. Held onto bottom of knot and sliced through it with a penknife. And my knuckle. Bled all over horse. Stuck finger under tap. Strapped it up with animal lintex and sellotape and carried on. Took it off later and realized I could see my actual knuckle bones moving. It was quite fascinating until I fainted. Came to and strapped it up again. Thankfully no infection, but I still have a nice scar. I shouldn't go out without a public health warning. Shortly after Russia unofficially took over Ukraine, a Ukrainian friend had a family member to visit. Why I decided to be inclusive and welcoming by saying hello in Russian, I do not know. He turned away with a look of disgust and never spoke to me again. Still cringing now. Delivering training to the entire staff, I took the stage after my boss and put my laptop down next to his. Couldn't figure out why I was changing the slides, but the big screen wasn't changing. He says very nicely, "That's the wrong laptop." I had to use his, not mine, as his was the one connected to the projector. Leaned across a worktop to look into a toaster to see how my toast was coming along. Simultaneously got scorched with the heat and walloped by it popping out. And this morning I put my blueberries and strawberries into my coffee instead of on my all bran, which in fairness was sitting in its bowl right next to the coffee. I'm always whacking myself in the face when I'm struggling with the duvet, likewise when I'm struggling into a sports bra. I've slammed my stiff window shut onto my index finger. Had a black fingernail for ages after that. Was convinced once that my contact lens was still in my eye. It wasn't, and kept pressing on my eyeball triangle to pop it out. Ended up with a red mark on my eye white. Decided to wash down kitchen tiles with water and Brillo pads. A rather large flame shot out of a socket along with an enormous bang, burned my hair. Entry through my thumb in a rubber glove, which melted, and I managed to cut the electricity to the full block of flats. 6, went into shock and vomited. XDH took me to hospital. Doctor said if I hadn't been wearing XDH trainers I would have died. This has really made me laugh, and reminded me of when I opened a new pack of ground coffee and blearily poured all of it into the cafetiere. When the kettle boiled, I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't figure out what. I just stood there thinking, where am I meant to put this water? I somehow managed to shut my leg in the car door. Also managed to shut my head in the car door too. When I was younger, I was helping my grandparents with the gardening after school. I was using the garden fork. I remember my granddad telling me to go careful and not to put it through my foot. So what did I do? Put it straight through my toe. Also damaged the ligaments, tendons and muscle in my ankle on a trampoline, and was in crutches for the best part of a year in secondary school. I've taken 2 forks instead of a knife and fork so many times, and sat in confusion swapping them around between hands, wondering what's gone wrong. Last Monday, on seeing how snowy and icy it was by looking out the window, I decided to go out and see how slippery it was before I left for work. Took 1 step outside our block and fell straight over and whacked my knee pretty hard. The irony of it, went straight back inside to see my knee was egg-shaped and very sore, and ending up WFH for 2 days. I was working on a deli counter many moons ago, and was cleaning the cooked meat slicer machine at the end of the day. You know, the ones where it is a big wearing blade. For some reason, my brain said, turn it on. It will be much quicker to clean that way, as I was wiping down the blade. Well, it definitely quickly sliced long ways about an inch into my finger. Still have the scar. Poured cream into a jug to serve with dessert at a dinner party, and promptly poured it over my head. Apparently caused by medication I was taking at the time. I have never been allowed to forget it. Had a go of DC scooter. It went a bit faster than I expected, and there was a curb coming up. Decided to jump off to avoid the curb. Face planted the floor, black eye. Took skin off both palms and knee out of my jeans. All on a main road to the amusement of passing cars. DH said to DS, as I got on said scooter, this should be good. I once put the microwave on with nothing in it to preheat it before I put the food in. It exploded. In my defense, I was about 18, drunk and stupid. Haven't done it again. I've drained my carefully made stock straight into a sieve and down the sink before, carefully keeping the bones that were meant for the bin. Yesterday, I discovered the butter in the bread bin, the bread in the coffee cupboard, and the coffee jar in the fridge. Bought a new bread knife. It's amazing, and now wondering why the heck I didn't buy one sooner. Cooked some part-baked baguettes, and as they were hot I was holding them with the silicone oven glove as I cut them. Forgot it was a mega sharp new knife. It went straight through the bread, the glove, the lining of the glove and into my finger. Ouch. Turned on my phone a few days ago, find a voice message waiting. It told me to call 222 to listen to it. I felt panicked thinking it might be spam, as I never get voicemails. Anyway, DH said it wouldn't hurt, so I dialed it and heard my own voice saying testing testing. It was me, well, testing. And the number shown was of course our own, which I'd called from to test. Doh. What we do under stress, eh? I jumped onto a bouncy castle we had hired for my son's 2nd birthday. He was happily bouncing, and I jumped up really high and landed on my bottom. The resulting propulsion catapulted him straight out of the front of the castle and only missed serious injury, a drop onto concrete. As my sister caught him, as she was standing in front of the castle at the time. I had no idea this would happen despite my huge size. He thought it was hilarious. Thank goodness for the quick reflexes of my sister. We're all doing strange stuff at present. However, I do remember my grandmother, dead since 1999, one night putting out a hot water bottle on the front step and taking an empty milk bottle up to bed. Drove several hundred miles to pick my parents up from a flight at Heathrow. They were coming back to UK after working abroad. Became increasingly alarmed when they didn't appear off the flight. I'd got the right flight and everything, just the wrong week. I had to make a project group with 2 guys in college, and one of them was total Casanova. As I wasn't able to find anybody else, I approached these 2 guys and asked them and they agreed. The other guy was a total nerd and gentleman, but the Casanova one took it as if I had some interest in him, and that's why I ask. A year past the project was finished and I heard he told this to few of his friends. I got to know about this and stopped speaking to him except when absolutely mandatory. In final year, I couldn't contain my anger and wrote him an email. He totally denied it and gave me a word or 2 about how full of myself I was. I don't think I ever recovered from this whole thing and always imagined he went around and had a good laugh about my email. How silly I was at 16 to let these things define my self-worth for years, and possibly even now. I had a Saturday job in a bakery when I was 15. Manageress took some hot trays of baked goods out of the oven and put them in the rack, telling me not to touch them as they were very hot. A short while later I had forgotten what she said and pulled a tray out with my hand. Ouch! I was so embarrassed, I didn't even say anything about my poor burnt hand. Brownie camp. Tried to dry out some wet seaweed by hanging it on an electric fence. Currently nursing a massive scrape in the roof of my mouth after holding a torch between my teeth while trying to get the children's bastard pony in from his field. Got head-butted in the torch for my troubles. Eating, and especially drinking alcohol, has been painful all weekend. Hope you are enjoying today's video from Mother's Narrative Network. Please like, comment and subscribe for more daily uploads. Don't forget to click the notification bell. As a teenager, I had a shelf above my bed with a metal desk lamp on it as it was a better angle to see when I was sitting up reading in my bed. One dark morning I went to turn it on while still lying down. The switch was one of the boxes partway along the cable, so I felt along the cable with my hand until I found the box, and instead of flipping the switch, I pulled the cable. The whole lamp flew off the shelf and smashed into my face. It cut my lip and caused a huge nosebleed as well as a big scratch down the bridge of my nose, which when it healed enough to touch I realized was actually a dent. I can still feel the dent when I run my finger down my nose now, a good couple of decades later. This was the first of many incredibly idiotic things I've done over the years. Making jam tarts in school, teacher says, "Do not touch the jam, it is very hot." Of course I stuck my finger in the jam, burnt it and put said finger in mouth and burned that too. My sixth form was a train ride away, and this was in the days of slam doors. getting on the train during rush hour, and the door slammed my foot and caught the heel of my shoe, tearing it clean off my foot and under the train. The conductor had to be called over. The train backed up. Conductor had to jump onto the track to retrieve my shoe, and off we went. Mortified. Had a crochet needle in my hand and decided to scratch my eyelid. Ended up at the optician's to find out I had scratched my cornea. It killed. Didn't notice the sign at the bottom of the escalators at Waterloo saying not to take luggage up. Got a third of the way, and wheelie suitcase shot towards me and I fell backwards, causing a domino reaction. Thankfully, the only person hurt said she was fine and was extremely understanding, even though I bet her knee was painful the next day. I will never forget the laughter from the down escalator, or how kind the staff were. I went to spend the night with my boyfriend. We had been away for the weekend. I was in the bath and he offered to pop a load of stuff into the washing machine. I thought, great, a man who does laundry. He washed everything in my bag, forgot to hang it out to dry, and I had to phone work on Monday and say I couldn't come in because I had nothing to wear. DH and best mate were late for a train, so running through a station. The travelator going in the correct direction was jam-packed full. Instead of running along the normal bit alongside, which just had a few people on like his mate, DH decided to run along the empty travelator going in the wrong direction. To his credit, he managed to keep up with his mate, although that may have been because his mate was laughing too much to run. I was in a hotel room on my own when, for some reason, my drunken self decided to roll from the head of the bed to the foot, a bit like a child rolls down a hill. Problem was I failed to stop at the end and rolled clean off the bed, crashing to the floor. My friend and I both have things you know you shouldn't be doing, but do them anyway moments. Hers was more heart-stopping for her than mine. Mine was putting my brand new expensive white bed linen in the washing machine with a bright pink sheet. Thought, I probably shouldn't be doing this, and did it anyway. Yep, pink linen. My friend was my MOH. She took the girls, her daughters and mine, BM dresses and hung them on the back of the hotel room door. She clopped the greasy black fire safety hing thing and thought, I probably shouldn't do this, and did it anyway. My father walked through the door and every single one of the dresses got a black streak across it. They were white dresses. She was in pieces, absolutely distraught. Luckily it was a winter wedding, so I had bought the girls little fur boleros. So I said that they could just wear them buttoned up, as this would cover the mark. She said later that she couldn't believe how cool I was about it, but really, what could I do? It was an accident, and it wasn't like we could get new dresses with about half an hour to go. She spent most of that half an hour with a pack of wet wipes and got the marks out, bless her. I once put up my umbrella, a huge automatic push, button 1, in a particularly bad torrential rainstorm whilst walking along a very busy major road. I soon regretted it. The wind immediately smashed it into the middle of my face. My nose was bleeding profusely, and I just stood there stunned. Several cars stopped to check I was okay. I just wanted the ground to open up and swallow me. The next day I had 2 black eyes. Rather than tell people I whacked myself in the face with an umbrella, I told them I fell down the stairs. It seemed less embarrassing somehow. I don't seem to do one stupid thing ever. It's always a load of stupid things in a row. One Sunday night, I was in a beer garden and my friends wanted a photo taken, so I drunkenly stood on a table to take it and then jumped off, landing all my weight on my little toe and messing up my foot so much I couldn't walk. We then decided to head into town, even though I had work the next day. I was so drunk that I didn't think to go home or to A&E. I let people carry me into a taxi and into the next bar. It was late. A friend got drunk and fell out with everyone, including me. I decided to leave, although as I hopped outside I realized I couldn't walk home and had no money for a taxi pre-Uber days. I saw a man getting into a taxi and asked if we could share, which he keenly agreed to. Got in the taxi and we were chatting when he said, "This is my stop." Realizing we were miles from my house still, I invited him to stay at mine, thinking at least this way he would pay the fare. He agreed. We got back to mine. I couldn't find my keys. Realized I was locked out and the only way in was to break open a window. I lived in a first-floor maisonette where the door was on the ground floor and then a flight of stairs to the apartment. I told him to break my bathroom window. He climbed on the roof and said, "Is this the right window?" And I insisted it was. He broke the window. It wasn't the bathroom window, but the one above the stairs. He fell, 10 to 12 feet. He impaled his arm on some glass and cut up all his back. He let me in and I didn't realize what happened until I crawled upstairs and saw the bathroom window was still intact. It was then I looked back and saw that the stairs, walls and carpet were covered in blood and glass. I panicked. We tried to clean him up using a tea towel tied around his arm. He then suggested the only way to make it up to him was to have sex. So I agreed, thinking that it was only fair. It didn't last long. After a few minutes, he said he had to stop as he'd lost too much blood. Then we both passed out. In the morning, we woke up, both in agony, and saw the mess and thought, what the fuck? My whole bed was covered in blood. It was like a horror movie. I called him a taxi to A&E. He was reluctant to go as he said he had community service and would not be able to miss it. The last thing he said that he hadn't realized I was lame when he came home with me last night. I had to call in sick for work. Then I called my landlady and told her honestly what had happened, and luckily she found it so funny that she was sympathetic. We got someone to repair the window and she helped me clean the blood from all over the place. It was like a murder scene. Then I headed over to A&E for my foot. Thankfully he wasn't still there. I spent 2 weeks on crutches, had a steep bill for the window repair and felt humiliated. I did manage to track the guy down on Facebook just to check he was okay. He told me he had permanent scarring on his arm, so he would never forget me. It looked on his profile like he had a girlfriend. I wondered what he must have told her. Never saw him again, thank God. Although a week later a friend said she saw a man in town picking litter with a bandaged up arm. Not me, but when I was at uni my friend and I were dancing the night away. She jumped off the stage in this very dramatic way and ended up in a great kneeling pose on the floor. Obviously we gave her a round of applause, but she suddenly said through gritted teeth, "I can't fucking get up." We found it hilarious and got her up and danced for another hour before leaving. She ended up in A&E a few hours later when the booze wore off and her ankle had turned swollen and blue. Turned out she had severely sprained it. My other friend tripped up a curb and broke her toe. She danced the night away on that before realizing. My own personal story, and I don't tell this one much. I once fell over in front of the entire local rugby team on a night out. I smacked my head on the floor, legs akimbo. I was wearing pink knickers, and my friend thought I had gone commando. As she valiantly bent down to help me and close my legs, her boob tube top fell down. I don't remember much of it, but I do remember waking up with a terrible headache and whiplash. Can't write this without feeling faint. I needed to put a new light bulb in a light fitting over the staircase. Placed chair near staircase banisters. For some reason the light was still switch on as I stood on the chair. Couldn't get the bulb to screw properly into the light and put my fingers into the light fitting and got the most almighty electric shock and nearly fell off the chair. Dear God. I'm not stupid, but the hell did I do it? Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed today's video. Before you go, please like, comment, and subscribe for more daily uploads. Don't forget to click the notification bell. What's a stupid thing you've done that you still think WTF did I do that for? Part 9. I have WTF did I do that for moments, most weeks grin, few others over the years that stand out though. When I was 13, I thought it would be a good idea to hold on to a, not particularly big or thick, tree branch and lift my legs up in front of me. Inevitably branch broke. I landed right on my ass and fractured my coccyx. Couldn't sit down for 2 weeks. When I was around 8, I decided to climb the A-frame of my swing. I slipped and the middle bar went straight between my legs and I dropped full force on the bar right onto my foo-foo. Mom had to check me over to ensure I hadn't permanently damaged myself. Few years ago, I was putting a new fat pack wardrobe together. By the time I got to screwing the doors on, I was feeling a bit tired, so decided to sit on the shelf to drill some the bottom door screws in. Naturally, the shelf collapsed under the weight of my gigantic ass, and I went hurtling through the wardrobe and ended up at the bottom. Can't write this without feeling faint. I needed to put a new light bulb in a light fitting over the staircase. Placed chair near staircase banisters. For some reason the light was still switch on as I stood on the chair. Couldn't get the bulb to screw properly into the light, and put my fingers into the light fitting and got the most almighty electric shock and nearly fell off the chair. Dear God. I'm not stupid, but the hell did I do it? Married my first husband, having already had more than one hint about who he really was. I wasn't ignoring that. I just thought, it can't be worse than my mother. It can. I've managed to burn my hand on the cooker, pulled my hand away, and punched myself square in the face. 7 months pregnant, very hot summer. I was ironing in just underwear and burnt a stripe across my bump. DS1 has done the drunken shimmy up the drainpipe. He also went to a summer festival and did not heed my advice on sunscreen. Slightly ginger and burns in a couple of hours. Apparently a bloke standing higher up pointed to him and shouted in a broad Cockney accent, "Look how red his fucking face is." I guess being a bit dumb runs in the genes. I had a row with my DH when I was very pregnant and decided to clean the bins, as you do. The bleach I tried to squirt didn't come out, so I looked into the end and managed to squirt it straight into my eye. I ran to the sink and tried to flush it out with loads of water, but in the end had to get a taxi to A&E. It was late when we got back. The following morning I found a huge purple bruise on my belly. I rang the midwife, but because it was the weekend, got put through to the ambulance service. I explained to the dispatcher, who turned out to be someone I knew, and she said she would get the duty midwife to come round. I decided to have a bath before she came and the bruise washed off. It was dye from the skirt I'd been wearing the previous evening. I had to call the ambulance service to explain, and they had a good laugh on me. Stood on the kitchen diner table last summer to clean the top of the cupboards above it. It's a strong, sturdy table, so no problems with that. What I didn't think about was how I was going to get down. The last time I had been up there was before my husband passed a while before. He would always help me up and down. I got up without thinking and couldn't get down. I decided I better jump off. In doing so, I took 4 table over with me and broke the table legs. I was okay, though shook up, and yes, I needed a new table, oh well. I had the other some years. I did donate the damaged one to someone I knew of who could repair it for a family member, just setting up home. Went out for a few drinks one Saturday night. Came home and nipped to the loo with my iPhone in the back pocket of my jeans. All was well until I pulled them back up and phone plopped out and landed in the lav. It was soaked and didn't come back from the dead. I had insurance, so claimed, collected new phone a few days later, and went for drinks on the following Saturday. I did it again. This time we rescued it somehow, but it never really worked properly after that. At an interview for assistant secretary's job, the boss and secretary interviewing me, I was asked by the boss where did I see myself in 5 years' time. I replied that I didn't want her job, nodding towards the secretary. As she looked so stressed, boss showed me out swiftly after that. Okay, I did not do this. A co-worker from years ago did, however. She was using a tampon for the very first time. She very carefully read the instructions, which included, for first-time users, a bit of petroleum jelly will make insertion more comfortable. Not having petroleum jelly, she decided that Vicks Vapor Rub, a mentholated chest rub, would work just fine. Do not try this at home. Hope you are enjoying today's video from Mother's Narrative Network. Please like, comment and subscribe for more daily uploads. Don't forget to click the notification bell. My latest stupid thing is reading this thread while sitting in the dark my daughter's room waiting for them to go to sleep. I keep laughing, and every time I laugh, no matter how much I try to suppress it, I have a massive coughing fit. So everyone is still awake. But seriously though, I could go on all night. I once drank a cocktail in Kathmandu without a second thought about the non-alcoholic ingredients, including ice. Even though for weeks we had been studiously boiling our drinking water and adding chlorine tablets too before drinking it. I got giardia. I recently tried to walk my 2 young border collies with my 2 young children and locked us all out the front door without the house key. Then I jumped the fence to see if I could break back into my own house, and my knee went crack and out from under me. I was on one side of a 5-foot fence and the dogs and kids on the other in our front yard. Luckily, it turns out I had forgotten to lock the back door. Unluckily, I ended up on crutches for a week, and my knee still isn't right. I stepped barefoot into a campfire. When I was 18, I did a fire walking course. It was a hippy-dippy mind over matter thing which culminated in walking over hot coals. Fast forward to when I was 21 traveling in India. It was New Year's Eve and I was rather intoxicated, sitting around a campfire telling a group of people about the course. Decided to demonstrate. My whole foot was one giant blister. It was agony and I couldn't walk for days. Probably should have gone to hospital, although the beach in Goa isn't the worst place to be laid up. Was changing the light bulb in a bedside lamp and saw a bit of lint in the middle. Took it out without unplugging the lamp and the shock blew me across the room. I took a large tray of ash from under our fire grate outside to put on the compost bin. I knew it was windy. Needless to say, the compost bin didn't get any and I needed a shower and thorough hair wash. I bought a new pair of office pants that said wash before wearing. I didn't wash them, just put them on and spent all day in them. I visited my friend's house and used her toilet. When I looked at the white wooden toilet seat, it had a huge R stain in black dye. Looked down at my legs and noticed my legs were also stained. A few years later, I bought a bathing suit that said wash before wearing. Again, I just put it on and went to a water park. An hour or so later, while queuing for a ride, someone pointed out to me I had black stains all around the arm straps, round my neck, and most embarrassingly around my neckline. I always wash the rice after cooking with boiling water, and one time forgot to boil the kettle and rinsed it with cold water. Also left the oven gloves on the hob while it was still alight and set fire to them. There was quite a blaze going by the time I noticed. That's happened more than once. Just thought of one my daughter did. At the age of about 4 on Christmas Eve, she stuck a tiny piece of Lego up her nose to stop her brothers having it. Had to go to A&E to have it removed. We weren't there too long, thankfully the triage nurse got it out. And we were back home quite quickly. They gave her a beautiful velvet pastel patchwork teddy bear, and I remember thinking, oh no, she'll be doing it on a regular basis to get more toys, lol. A few summers ago, I was trying to fix a trellis to a wall in the back garden. DH was working in the front garden. As I was drilling, a gust of wind blew my long hair into the drill, wrapping it around it and yanking my head at speed into the wall. At this point I am attached to drill, pinned to wall and daren't put the drill into reverse in case I press the wrong button and make things worse. I shout for DH, who can't hear me, so attempt to call him. He can't hear his phone and it takes about 15 minutes to raise him. When he finally rounds the corner, he finds me half sprawled on the floor with my ear on the wall clinging to the drill. He reverses the drill and releases me. I'm left with a bald patch, which is still thinner than the rest of my hair 2 years on, nasty bruising to my forehead and whiplash. I now tie my hair up whilst doing DIY. Put my husband's expensive camera on a wobbly shelf. It fell off some hours later as the walking past the shelf, the floorboards creaked and made the shelf shake. The expensive camera fell down and broke. I then took it into the lounge to show my husband. He was so upset. We still have it now. Just sits there on a shelf in the bedroom, not being used for years now. I've told this on my then baby group. When Dee Dee was less than a week old, we went out for the morning, had a lovely morning pain-free CS. Then I was upstairs having a rest when then husband brought me a cup of tea. For some reason, I put it down directly on the bed. It rolled and burnt my bare thigh, so I leapt up and pulled my stitches and was no longer pain-free. Just WHY. Decided to rent and drive a boat for a week when I didn't know how to drive a boat, nearly crashed it several times. Put fingers in a hand blender with it still on, bleached my hair, and was in a hurry so didn't wash it up fully. Lost a huge chunk of hair. The worst was only a couple of months ago. I was trimming my lady area and cut my fanny. I cut actual flesh off. Oh, mine. Apart from marrying a man, just because he was called Big Gusticus, I can tick off a lot of the ones above: throwing the stock, pouring the gunky water down the sink, I've taken the U-bend off, drinking my contact lenses, stapling myself, ironing myself, falling off wobbly things I know are wobbly, but it's just for a moment, wrapping my hair round a drill. I'll add, choosing to start plumbing tasks after 7 p.m, when all the shops selling the part one don't have in order to put it back together successfully or closed in winter, and repeatedly stabbing a sawing my left hand that's holding the thing I'm cutting a sawing. Both annoyingly regular occurrences. I'm a disaster area. When I was about 21, I lived in Paris for a year. Got on a very crowded metro train with my mobile phone in the outside pocket of my rucksack, which was fully on my back. Found myself surrounded closely by somewhat dodgy-looking blokes. Thought to myself, probably shouldn't have my mobile phone there, would be quite easy to pickpocket it. Lo and behold, it got pickpocketed. The fact that thought went through my head, but I did nothing about it. Visiting relatives in Germany. Stupidly decided to take all our cash, nearly 1,000 euros, passports, cards, etc. in my handbag on a tram ride into town, then left it on the tram and only noticed 15 minutes later when could not find my phone, also in handbag. Why? WHY did I think it was a good idea when I needed almost none of it with me and it was perfectly safe at my relative's house. Unbelievably, I got it all back. Someone handed in to the driver, who handed it in having seen how much cash there was. Poured the cork out of a bottle of Prosecco with my teeth. It wasn't twisting with my hand. Nearly gave myself fucking whiplash. Should have just shook it like an F1 driver and let science take over. This thread is absolutely hilarious, has kept me entertained for most of the day between wrestling with a toddler and keeping an eye on a 4-year-old. Funny but painful one I did recently was trying to tear the cling film along the jagged edge, which I was doing with such force, and had my head bent towards the roll. I managed to dislodge the roll from the box, which swung round towards my face, resulting in a split lip and bruised mouth. Jumped off a moving old Routemaster bus. It was moving slowly, but, dear reader, it turns out that even when it's moving really slowly, it's moving a hell of a lot quicker than you think. Rather than waiting for it to stop at the bus stop, I thought I would surely impress the rather handsome chap who had been sitting across from me by leaping diesel-like off the bus in a sophisticated fashion, like the woman in the old Charlie perfume advert. Sadly, it didn't go quite according to plan, and as I hit the pavement, I had to keep running sideways to stop myself from falling and careered straight into the queue of people at the bus stop, duly knocking over a young chap who was standing there minding his own business. My efforts to try to look as if I'd done it on purpose were in vain, and the poor fella, who I'd knocked over shouting, "What the fuck are you doing?" didn't really help. I had to change my route to work after that and never got on that bus again. Not me, but my husband decided to show off and put the flaming sambuca out with his hand, claiming he'd done it so many times before. Little did he know that this particular one had been lit for quite some time. It completely suctioned to his palm. He literally had to shake it off, smashing the glass in the middle of the restaurant. He was in agony, spent the next couple of days off work with a fever in bed, still has a faint ring mark on his palm over 15 years later. When pushed by his then boss about what had happened, he replied, "That's nothing. I did that with my ass once," and proceeded to drop his pants and show him the matching ring mark on his cheek. The glucose tolerance test. I had 2 in a week, a day apart, because I lost the will to argue with them anymore over it. I came out of the hospital and collapsed into the road on a blind bend. Apparently the skid the car did to avoid me was very dramatic. I declined all further appointments and carried on with the free birth I had planned. I once need to leave work a little early for a doctor's appointment. Instead of emailing my boss, Mr. Stafford, I emailed staff. Everyone in the entire... I have agoraphobia and was trying graded exposure on my own. I had walked to the town centre with the plan of going into one shop. As I was turning the corner, I was head-on with a really good-looking man. It turned into the dance thing you do. Only instead of stepping side to side, I'd done this kind of crisscross with my legs. So instead of stepping to the side, I was pretty much stood on the spot, repeatedly crossing one leg in front of the other, only moving inches at a time. He just stared at me, sniggered, and then walked around me. I then had to face the embarrassment of trying to hold my laugh in walking along on my own, resulting in the odd snort from where I couldn't contain it. I never made it to a shop, because I couldn't cope with the idea of being thought of as some crazy person walking along, alone, in hysterics, at what seemed to be nothing. I have never tried it since. I still think of it to this day, and wonder what the fuck possessed me to do that kind of leg movement. I'm so socially awkward. I often wonder if he thought I was trying to do some kind of sexy walk towards him, because it was like an exaggerated, extremely exaggerated, model catwalk walk. In my first job, I once tried to pick something up off the floor while sitting on an office chair on wheels with my legs crossed. It almost tipped all the way over. I half fell off, and the momentum caused me to go flying across the tile floor, and I was trying to use my hands to stop, as my legs were stuck in the cross-legged position, still with my bum on my seat. But I actually just went faster, and at the same time my ass got free. I fell out of the chair and crashed into a filling cabinet. Broke a wrist and a couple of ribs, smiling face with open mouth and tightly closed eyes. At the point I was leaning over and felt the wheels move, I thought this might be a bad idea. My boss had to take me to hospital. You've reminded me of my topple down the stairs. I was at the top and carrying a bin full of rubbish down, a sweet packet wrapper fell out, and I twisted round to pick it up, and then realized that my foot was not on the stair anymore. I did 2 backward rolls down the stairs from top to the bottom and banged into the door of the cupboard at the bottom, and then bounced off and landed halfway up the hallway. I think I knocked myself out, as I remember opening my eyes and seeing all the rubbish from the bin everywhere. Anyway, I tried moving my feet and could feel everything okay, so I gingerly got up and tottered into the lounge for a sit down. Apart from being a bit shaken, I was unhurt apart from a small scrape on my wrist and a small nick on my ankle. I did bang the back of my head on the cupboard door, which was quite painful, but I didn't think to get it checked. It was about a week later that Liam Neeson's wife died in that skiing accident from a bump on the head. I remember thinking that I had a lucky escape, Went to a very posh dinner at the Hilton in Park Lane with clients and my bosses. Got so drunk that I chopped my boss's wine glass in half with mini cricket bats we'd been given, leaving her holding the glass while the stem smashed on the floor. On a different occasion, persuaded the senior partner at my firm to hold a sambuca in his mouth while I tried, unsuccessfully, to light it. Decided after a night at the bar that it would be appropriate to cut out my stitches from a wound on my arm myself. It's no wonder I hardly ever drink nowadays. Ran up an incredibly muddy hill in my brand new birthday outfit knowing I was going for a family meal, and my mum would kill me, and knowing I was going to fall. I fell. Right down the hill, was absolutely covered in mud, and broke my wrist, so we sat in children's A+. Even though I was 16, Mum was not happy. But sympathetic in her own way, haha. Not me but sis. We were both helping Mum's friend with gardening. I'm used to power tools and did very well, although after a while needed a rest. Enter stage left my ditzy sis, who faints watching Holby City swinging the hedge cutters like a samurai sword, and me saying that's going to stick right in your leg as she stuck it in her knee. She passed out, came round with the paramedics. The cut wasn't so bad, she was able to stay home and clean it up. I laughed for about 8 months. Remembered a recent one. 2 cars decided to overtake a parked car on their side of the road, so I had to come to an abrupt stop as I was driving in the opposite direction. In my annoyance, I gave them both a good toot of the horn. Unfortunately, the second car was a police car. Lights, her siren not on. He did a U-turn, then came chasing after me with his sirens on. I now have full knowledge of when, and when not, to use the horn under the highway code. Apparently I'd saved the driver in the first van, who was going to be pulled over for using their mobile. Tried to prise a jammed, toasted tea cake out of the toaster with a knife. The toaster blew up when the knife touched the element. While trying to separate 2 frozen pork chops apart with a very sharp knife, and thinking, I bet I cut myself doing this, I cut myself doing it. The wound was deep, and as I ran it under the tap and the blood briefly cleared, DS and I peered at something white in my finger. It's your bone, said DS in a spooky voice, at which point I put my head between my knees. Painted the outside of my house and realized that there was a fine spray of cream paint all over the French doors and windows. Used the rough side of a sponge to scrub it off. Not only did it not get the paint off, but it also left ugly scratches all over the double glazing. I was 12 and put my hand on a raging hot hob ring. I near broke my toe with the shock. I jumped back, my foot kicked out. My thought process, I wonder if that ring is as hot as it looks. Bloody idiot. This story will out me to any of my friends that maybe hear grin. I'd been shaving my pubes all off for years, but it has grown back full bush. So I thought I'd use a hair removal cream one day instead. Because it was so hairy, I bought the leg one instead and then left it on for double the time that it said on the instructions, to be on the safe side. It all just wiped away beautifully, along with the top 2 layers of skin on my hoo-ha. Oh, the pain. I had to carry a tube of Jamoline in my bag all day at work, and apply it intermittently to be able to sit down. Had a Barney with staff at restaurant, next day threw like a chicken and shat my pants several times. Never upset the person cooking your lunch. Decorating DS's bedroom, emptied his big IKEA Kallax unit, just enough to be able to slide it across the floor on my own. I knew there was stuff on the top of the unit, but didn't think to take it all off. Big brass football trophy hit me on the head. Had to sit down for a bit. OH is terrible for burning his hands. He'll use a tea towel to take a baking tray out of the oven, then put the towel down and pick the baking tray up with his bare hands. It's like he thinks it will have cooled within a couple of seconds. Had a terrible headache for 3 days. I don't take painkillers as a rule, but couldn't sleep or eat, so got out of bed. Didn't put on my glasses, mistake. Drawer full of medications, reached in and got paracetamol. Mine are soluble and wrapped in paper. Pulled it out, put in small glass of water, waited for it to fizz with my poor head in my hands. Grabbed it, gulped it down, nauseated face. Wasn't paracetamol, but Milton tablet had found itself in wrong drawer. I ran to loo just in time and nature prevailed. Phoned 111, but had a 2-hour wait as COVID had just descended, so Google then rang 999. After fits of laughter both ends, she said she would have to send ambulance. That wasn't an option. I'm not dying. Decided to get friend out of bed, as driving would be dangerous. Could pass out, sitting in hospital car park with sick bag waiting for doctor. Too scared to go near anyone, cause big nasty flu thing about. Shit, little did we know, anyhow lived to tell the tale. Doctor had a good laugh too, said it was a new one on him. His advice: put your glasses on. When I was young, I always had an overwhelming urge to bite hard into a glass when I drank out of it to see what it would be like. One day, in my late teens, I just decided, fuck it, and did it. What a twat. Shards of glass and glass fragments all in my mouth. Safe to say that I never had that urge ever again. Which is a plus point, I guess. I was wearing fake nails and was straightening my hair for a night out. I wondering if I put the hot straightener on the nail, would I feel the heat on my finger? Yes, turns out I would. Luckily it hadn't gone through or melted much, but came off easy enough. I was in my 20s, so not a daft teen. In a rented house years ago, the bulb had gone in the closet. Couldn't see a thing to determine if it was a screw or bayonet fitting. So I decided to feel the socket with my fingers instead. Hasten to add that I was thrown across the room with a massive electric shock and ended up in A&E with chest pains from the jolt. Just one of the many stupid things I've done in my life. Ex's nan was going to die soon. I was taking him to the hospital after work. Raced home, he says I'm too late, as she died 15 minutes ago. For some reason I think he's joking and laugh and say, ha ha, get your coat, silly. I fell down the stairs while carrying newborn DD. Now I imagine in this situation, most people would cradle the baby for dear life. Not me. I let go of her and used my hands to save myself. Why oh why? Luckily she landed on my lap. I had an op where a part of my ribs were removed, rendering them rather delicate. Keep forgetting. I have leaned out of bedroom window looking for cat 3 times. Each time I crack a rib. The pain is excruciating for weeks, but still keep doing it. These are hysterical, another nomination for classics here. I am a major klutz. In my first job, I thought I was the bomb, wearing 5-inch stilettos while going up and down the office spiral staircase, until I snagged a heel on the ratty carpet and propelled myself headfirst into the main reception. I could only lie there wheezing until the senior partner helped pick me up. Switched to kitten heels thereafter. Blush pregnant with twins, get out of the car and shut the door on my thumbnail. DH had to drill through the nail to release the pressure. 2 weeks later, I did the same thing with the other thumb, more drilling required. Lost both nails. Doing the ironing with a huge baby bump. Burned through my t-shirt and now have a massive scar just above my belly button, which is still visible 16 years later. Took the kids put on their scooters, thought it looked easy. No. The back wheel dug in the ground, throwing me off. Dislocated the shoulder I landed on and had to send small child to find DH to pick me up to go to A&E. So very many more. Working on my gap here abroad. I would walk home from the nightclub where I worked at 3 or 4 alone. It was so dark and along a stretch of highway. Twice I was approached by a man in a car. One of the men followed me for a while too. Looking back, I was so naive. Still gives me the shivers. Earlier today, pulled dressing gown off the hook in my bedroom. It's one of those hooks that just sits on top of the door so can move. Yes, you guessed it. Hook flew off and hit me in the face. Lovely black eye now. I am always tripping over nothing. I once tripped over nothing while wearing flat shoes when I was carrying a sleeping DC, landed really awkwardly trying to save DC from getting hurt, but in the meantime completely mashed up my ankle, luckily just a sprain, but it still plays up now. I was in AE having my collarbone x-rayed to see if it had healed okay, swapping stories of how, where, which bit was broke with others waiting too. Mine fell down pothole jogging, looked up when dog barked, just at wrong moment, flew in the air and plonk. Lots of drunken falls by most but one woman, bless. She came home from night shift, stood on step, which a poor slug, just minding its own business, was happily slithering only to be squished underfoot. Woman's leg twisted as it slipped on slime, she fell snapping her leg in 3 places. We all laughed except her. A really lovely guy told me he liked me and asked me out. A guy I would have loved to have gone out with. But I got so ridiculously awkward I ended up telling him no, because he didn't really like me. It was just human nature to be attracted to symmetry, and I had a super symmetrical face. So it wasn't really him making a choice, to that he liked me and wanted to go out with me. It was just a classic case of the subconscious part of his brain being attracted to symmetry. Why? He looked so confused. Never killed anything so dead in my life. I'm another that's pierced the gas tube in a freezer. Seems there are a lot of us grin. My D-Dad did that. The top shelf of their freezer wasn't a drawer, but a drop-down door. The door wouldn't stay closed. So he decided to put a hook and eye in it. The hook in the door went well. The eye in the top of the freezer not so well. Apparently, there was a long PFFFFFFFFT noise and the freezer stopped working. Luckily, I had just moved into a new flat and had their old freezer, which I hadn't filled yet. Cue a rather relieved D-Dad arriving at mine with the contents of the freezer, so he had a bad news the good news story to tell my DM when she got home. Years ago, all glammed up heels, hair etc. at a close friend's wedding and also well into the evening, so had had a few by that time. I was standing 2 steps up on a ground staircase, having a conversation with the groom, who was stood on floor. End of conversation. I attempted to walk away, however had forgotten, I wasn't also stood on the floor. I'm quite short, so was face height. Dramatically splat on the floor in front of many guests. Bruised ego, only damage done, thank goodness. First day at a new job, decided to join colleagues for lunch on the balcony. While wearing a fitted suit-style skirt, I tried to navigate stepping over to sit on the bench seat. Promptly split my skirt up to my ass. Kind new colleague retrieved a scarf and had to wear that wrapped around me until I managed to duck out to the shops and buy a new skirt. Not quite as WTF as some of these LOL. I once had some vitamin samples randomly sent to me in the post from an unknown source. Packet just said multivit, not other real details or anything. Anyway, I opened them up and took one straight away without even thinking. I remember my ex-husband just staring at me in complete horror that I'd just taken some random pills. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed today's video. Before you go, please like, comment, and subscribe for more daily uploads. Don't forget to click the notification bell.